Tennessee State Senator Brian Kelsey is the managing attorney at the Liberty Justice Center, and they're offering to represent businesses who want to fight these vaccine mandates pro bono. Thank you for being here, Senator. Appreciate your time with us today. There's so many questions. It's so tough to be a small business owner nowadays, and especially now with this mandate. I'll just start with, how in the world are they going to actually enforce this? I know they're going to go through OSHA, but how do you check up on something like this?
Well, these are some great questions that you raised, Dana, and thanks so much for having me on. I mean, they're talking about enforcing it with the minimum of $14,000 fines, and then there's even talk that some fines could go as high as, believe it or not, $700,000 per violation. So, I mean, this is just a huge overreach from the federal government to try to impose a COVID-19 vaccine mandate on 100 million Americans. That's 2/3 of our workforce, and we're ready to fight it at Liberty Justice Center.
Yeah, that's a lot of the workforce, and right when businesses actually maybe are kind of starting to get their feet underneath them, of course, if we don't have more disruptions from supply chains. But this at up to $70,000 to $700,000, and I know that depends on the severity. There's like a graduating scale there. So what happens if there's an adverse reaction? Because one of the things that we know with vaccines is that they're really, it's very difficult to actually get some kind of restitution for that. There was a law that was modified back in 2015. So how is this handled? I mean, how are they? It seems like it would be easier to do it state by state, but because they chose to make this a federal edict, it's a lot harder. So how does that work if someone does have an adverse reaction because they just wanted to keep food on the table?
Well, there still are a lot of unknown questions out there because the Biden administration announced that this rule is going to go into effect about 3 weeks ago now, but they haven't actually published the rule. And the minute that they do, we are prepared to fight it at Liberty Justice Center and go ahead and challenge that rule in the court system. But we haven't quite seen or heard exactly how this is going to work. I mean, think about it.
That's crazy. I'm not to interrupt you, but that is so crazy. Businesses plan so far in advance for things, and now that they haven't even published the rule.
That's right. They haven't published the rule. It could come down any day, but here's the kicker. It's an emergency rule, so it would take effect immediately, which is why we are ready to spring into action at Liberty Justice Center and challenge it in court. I mean, it really is an outrageous overreach of the federal government. They do not have the authority to mandate vaccines, certainly not to do so through an OSHA emergency workplace rule, which is what they're claiming they're going to try to do.
Yeah, especially when, there's breakthrough transmissions. I'm just wondering if there is a legal way to, you have false advertising, and I know there's litigation about false advertising and there are protections on that. What about when the federal government, I know we're in totally uncharted territory here, but what about when the federal government is mandating that everyone takes something that they're advertising as something that will transfer to you immunity, which apparently it doesn't because there are still breakthrough transmissions?
Yeah, we've certainly seen that those have taken place across the country for sure and on a regular basis. And that's what this is really comes down to, is that this is a deeply personal health decision that individual Americans need to be grappling with and making on their own. It does not need to be mandated from the top from President Biden. And he knows that he doesn't have the legal authority to do that. And that's why he's trying to backdoor it in through an emergency workplace rule, which is supposed to cover things like toxic spills and things of that nature. It doesn't belong there. The federal government doesn't have this power. And so at Liberty Justice Center, and for those who work for, by the way, who would like to join us, you can visit at libertyjusticecenter.org if you work for a company that has 100 or more employees that does not want to participate, or if you own one. But what we're going to do is we're going to file a lawsuit directly with the Circuit Court of Appeals and ask that this emergency rule immediately be stopped. And that is the goal. And we think that we are on solid legal ground to win that case.
Isn't it a violation of state sovereignty for the federal government to demand that states not just operate, but also fund federal programs and policies like this? I mean, isn't that like a commandeering clause violation?
There definitely, you're absolutely right, Dana, are states' rights issues that will be brought up. And in fact, we have now 24 attorneys general that have announced that they will be challenging the law as well, and a similar number of governors. But frankly, we think that our claims are stronger on behalf of individual business owners or workers who work at businesses. And so that's why we're encouraging people to go to libertyjusticecenter.org and sign up and let us know your story so that we could potentially represent you for free.
I like your approach to it, Senator. I have to bring up, though, what some of the listeners of my radio program and viewers of this program have been discussing. So And I'm bringing this up because it is kind of interesting. Can someone claim like an ADA issue and say, oh, well, if you force me to get this injection, that's a violation of ADA, and then engage in litigation that way? I mean, what is the potential of something like that?
Well, we have seen that Disabilities Act claims have gone forward. Unfortunately, many of them have gone forward against school districts, for example, that are imposing mask mandates, and so, or those that are not imposing mask mandates. And so I think that there are some claims there that can be brought for sure, but we feel strongest about this particular claim in which we're saying the federal government simply does not have the power under our Constitution to mandate vaccines. Period. It is a government of limited powers. Public health issues are left to states, and they're not left to the federal government, and they're certainly not left to a workplace safety regulation organization.
Yeah, which brings me to my last question for you, Senator. You mentioned states. The federal government can't do this, but states potentially could. What route could states take in order to, I mean, I realize not every governor is going to do this, or every state legislature, but what could certain states do to actually maybe bypass if the federal mandate is tossed out of the court? Some states I would imagine would pick up this slack and try to do it themselves. What could that look like potentially?
I think you're absolutely right about that. If we are able to be successful in stopping the federal rule from going into place, I do think that we'll see many governors who try to push it forward in their own states. But those claims are largely going to turn on individual state laws and even state constitutions, and so we might end up in a situation where we have different outcomes in different states.